This is your profanity warning. Your warning that bad words are about to be said in the following podcast. If there are children in the room, in the house, or indeed within a 5-mile radius, please send them away. This podcast is not for us. Is that good?
Yeah, it was great. That was great.
Okay.
Coming at you live from the recent past in New York City, where we'd kill for a decently furnished sub-basement walk-down. Welcome to 21 Jump Scare. I'm Eric Winnick.
And I'm Bradford Lorick. 21 Jump Scare is a podcast about horror films told from 2 points of view.
We call this podcast 21 Jump Scare because, well, at least for now, our plan is to only produce 21 episodes.
But also because, as in a certain TV series from the late 80s, one of us is going back to school, as it were, to learn something new. And this sick individual will be experiencing a horror film he hasn't seen yet.
So each week we bring you a film from the perspective of someone rewatching it and from the POV of someone experiencing it for the first time, which is to say me. So now let's turn to this week's film, Pascal Laugier's 2008 psychological horror film, Martyrs.
So, as our first timer, why don't you start us off with a brief synopsis, Eric?
The film begins with Lucie, a child who has clearly been abducted, beaten, and starved, escaping from a warehouse where she was kept for an undisclosed period of time. Years later, Lucie is in a hospital for abused and abandoned children, where she meets another child, Anna. The two become friends, roommates, and perhaps more. But Lucie is haunted by ghosts of her past and engages in a devastating pattern of self-harm. 15 years later, we find ourselves in a beautiful, modern home in the woods, witnessing a fairly typical breakfast scene with 2 well-off parents and their 2 kids. After the meal, the doorbell rings. The father goes to answer the door. Waiting patiently outside the home is Lucie, who has come to take revenge on what she believes are her former captors. And thus begins an odyssey for Anna, which begins with cleaning up Lucie's mess and ends with a discovery that will lead to her own undoing as she realizes she is anything but alone in this house in the woods.
All righty, sir. Well done.
Really?
Yeah, that was pretty good.
You got to give a little bit. You got to give a taste of it.
So, who's in the film?
Well, this film stars 2 astonishing French actresses, and let's see how I do here. You're gonna grade me on my pronunciation here. I'm gonna try it. Mylène, Jampanoï, Jampanoï. Mylène, Jampanoï.
No, that's pretty great. Yeah.
Morjana, Alaoui.
That's pretty good too.
Morjana, Alaoui.
Yes.
I don't know. As Lucie and Anna, respectively.
Also, I want to call out one of my favorite performances in this film by the actress Catherine Begin.
Yes.
She's Canadian, as a character known only as Mademoiselle. She is definitely a favorite of mine.
I saw her and I thought of you immediately.
Immediately. How do you not?
Right.
But the director and screenwriter is Pascal Laugier, a French director best known for this film, though he did go on to direct a film with a slightly larger budget after this one, The Tall Man with Jessica Biel, and a film you can find on Shudder right now, Incident in a Ghostland. And I have actually seen both of those films.
Yes.
The Tall Man was really promising, but ultimately a little bit disappointing.
Hmm.
And Incident in a Ghostland is pretty terrific. I like it, but I think it doesn't feel quite as sophisticated as Martyrs does.
Yeah. Yeah. Now, the tall man is not to be confused with the slender man, correct?
No, while both are tall, the
Yeah.
Slender Man is also slender. He's also a
Yeah.
thin man.
But I think we could fairly say this is Logier's best known film, and it seems to have come at a good time, being part of what is considered, I guess, a 10-year wave of films loosely known as the New French Extremity, which includes films like Inside and Trouble Every Day, Gaspar Noé's Irreversible, and Alex Aja's High Tension. Bradford, can you say if anything about these films? Have you seen them? Do you feel there's any kind of a common thread?
Sure. I mean, there are stylistic similarities among a lot of these films, and certainly I think filmmakers' relationship to violence, to if we're being smarty pantses here, we could say existentialism, nihilism, all
Hmm.
kinds of philosophies are being explored here. But among the ones that you just mentioned, I have seen Inside.
Yeah.
I've seen Irreversible. I've seen High Tension. I've seen a handful of others as well. I mean, I think the way that these films all look at sort of the body, at ideas of violence, or more, I guess, specifically or accurately, ultra violence,
Yeah.
all of it has a very sort of artful quality to it. It's explored in a
Right.
really sort of elegant way, and generally speaking, it's at the service of another sort of bigger idea in these French new extreme films, which I think kind of differentiates it from like torture porn, the
Mm.
the Saws and the Hostels, which are, though they may aspire to a certain kind of intellectual cleverness, right? They're not making art films here,
No. Interestingly, I did see Irreversible in the theater when it came out. I was reviewing films for a website that my friend Doug and I started called Filmington.
Filmington, yeah.
Yep, yeah, which you can link to on our website. You can still see the archive of reviews. And I did see this film at the Angelica Film Center one afternoon. I think I saw it by myself in the middle of the day. And it was a visceral experience, let's just say. There is infamously a 9-minute rape scene in the middle of the film, and it's very, very hard to take. It's a tough watch. I remember somebody walked out during the rape scene and then came back in. I stayed because I felt like I needed to see the whole film from start to finish to appreciate it fully. So I don't think I knew I was seeing a part of the New French Extremity, but then again,
well, you were in very good company, because when it played at Cannes, people fled.
yeah,
People talked about being at the premiere of Irreversible, like the
yeah,
premiere of The Exorcist or something.
yeah,
People
yeah.
fainting and vomiting in the aisles.
That film was like this one. I'm happy to say actually had some ideas behind it other than let's, scare people or gross people out.
Well, I mean, also, I would suggest that both of these films, I think, create a similar relationship with the viewer. I mean, certainly there are ideas of spectatorship or voyeurism, I think, that a lot of these directors are looking at in what they are subjecting their audiences to, what their audiences are choosing to look at or not look
Right.
at, or choosing
Right.
to sit through or leave, you know?
Yeah.
And so that is again, I mean, it is a kind of confrontational attitude toward the viewer
Yeah.
on the part of these filmmakers. I am no expert on, on new French extremity. I've seen a lot of these films, of course, and mostly because of their sort of reputation when they came out. Those stories like the premiere at Cannes.
Right.
And I have probably seen all of the Saw films. I've probably watched all of the special features on all of those movies. But at the same time, I think I have a greater respect for something like Martyrs than I do for something like Saw on a dozen sort of intellectual, philosophical, experiential levels.
Sure. So, Mr. Lork, tell us, how did Martyrs do?
Well, according to 21 Jump Scare Brooklyn bureau chief IMDb, this film cost around 3.4 million euros, which is around $4 million to make. Its cumulative worldwide gross was 1.1 million. We don't have opening weekend data, but we do know it premiered in France on September 3rd, 2008.
Yes, needless to say, Martyrs was nominated for count 'em, 6 Fangoria Chainsaw Awards, including Best Film, Best Screenplay, Best Actress, Morjana Alaoui, Best Supporting Actress, Mylène Jampanoï, whatever her name is, Best Limited Release Film, and Best Makeup.
The makeup was very good, too.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Critics were split on this film, surprise, surprise, with Variety stating, French splatterfest Martyrs offers a few genuine scares early on, but they're quickly washed away by all the blood tossed around by writer-director Laugier. With no apparent goal beyond keeping the ketchup count high, this pick dispenses with its plot, basically Hostel without the laughs, and turns its 2 heroines into human pincushions for the talented makeup FX team. Film should score okay with hardcore gore fans, but others will expect martyrdom for sticking it out until the end. Hell-bent on joining the Splat Pack, Helmer Laugier has neither the humor nor the skills to make the pick interesting. Must have left halfway through, I swear.
Hostel without the laughs. Imagine that.
Hostel without the laughs.
Jesus.
I mean, it is not a funny film.
It's not a funny film, but it's not Hostel either. Some critics were kinder, however. Slant Magazine's Simon Abrams said, Martyrs has an intelligence and a dogged determination to do and say what its predecessors could or would not. And with that, I could not agree more. So now's about the time we need to issue a full spoiler alert.
So we will be spoiling this film completely and utterly. If you have not seen this film, please watch it or don't watch it, and then come back and listen to the rest of the episode. Wash out your eyes, take a shower.
How are you feeling? You feeling good about yourself? Glad you watched that? This is why you're here. Bradford, talk to me. How'd you first hear about this film? Where'd you see it?
So, I believe I've mentioned before, certainly I've mentioned to you, that when I lived in Brooklyn, in the super hip neighborhood of Greenpoint,
I remember it well.
There was an incredible DVD rental store called Photoplay. It was run by this guy, Michael, who used to work for Film Forum. I mean, he really took a great curatorial approach to his inventory, let's say. And he knew his customers' tastes very well. And he recommended Martyrs when it came out on DVD to me. And that's how I saw it for the first time. So as soon as it hit the American DVD market, I saw it. So it could not have been terribly long after it came out.
So this was 2008. torture
It's probably
porn.
2008, 2009 that I've seen it.
So
yeah.
torture porn has already kind of made its mark in America. Some of the other films we discussed earlier, the other French extremity films have come out. You've seen them. Perhaps you know what to expect. Perhaps you don't know what to expect. But you have chosen this film as part of our 21 Jump Scare curriculum. And I'm just curious, so why this film?
It has a very strong reputation among, I think, genre fans. In the past, when I've sort of sought out more information about the film, and I think that that it has great artistic merit, and that it isn't simply ultra violence for its own sake. There's so much more going on conceptually in this film. I think the horror films that I tend to gravitate toward are the films that have a sort of supernatural component, or ideally, fingers crossed, some kind of occult or sort of satanic panic kind of element, and this film has a sort of like questionable supernatural antagonist in it, and it also has a strange sort of esoteric quality to it, to the sort of real antagonists of the film. And for all of these reasons, and to make sure that your education about scary movies is as well-rounded as it can be, I thought we should probably look at something relatively new or contemporary. I mean, it's 12 years old or whatever, but still, I mean, it's in this century. It's foreign. It's a pretty sterling example of the new French extremity subgenre. And yeah, for all of those reasons and more, I thought it would be a good one to add to the syllabus.
And I'm glad you did, because you're right. I did want to see this film. I was curious, morbidly curious.
But, you're seeing it for the first time. So what did you think?
Well, first of all, let me just say that unlike the other films that we've watched in this series, I decided to not take notes during the film, and I decided not to watch it on my television. I actually decided to watch it on my computer with my headphones on so I could play it as loud as I wanted to. I just wanted to let it wash over me. And in a way that I haven't with the other films, I've either stopped them, made notes on my phone, like voice notes. This one, I didn't do any of that. I literally just sat and watched the whole thing from start to finish without stopping.
I'm thrilled to hear that. I think that's how we should always experience every sort of movie that we're watching.
I think with this one especially, I didn't want to pause it or like go get a snack in the kitchen. I wanted to kind of like just do it.
Go right through. Yeah.
Yeah. So one thing I think this film does, and maybe we have the French extremity movement to thank for this, is I think it expands the definition of horror. This is not about a haunted house. This is not about zombies. It's not about aliens. It's about people and the horrible things that we do to one another. I mean, this is terror of the known. And for me, this film had shades of Salò, Society, Rosemary's Baby, even The Vanishing, in that we see erudite, well-to-do people who live this horrible kind of double life, in which they just relish forcing people to confront their own frailty or mortality. And you can see the influence that this film has had on other films, especially ones like Get Out, which I think is one of the reasons that this film becomes more disturbing the more you think about it. Think about what Anna is put through at the end of this film. The very fact that there are people who embrace that torture and hold it up as like high art, what she goes through. I mean, that's the thing that you're sort of left with, is the cruelty of these people in this sort of secret society who are looking for, sort of the perfect martyr, or in some cases, what seems to be kind of like the perfect photo op when you think about it.
I do have to say, in response to the idea of a new kind of horror, right? I mean, this is 2008
Yeah.
that we're looking at it in.
Yep.
Right. I mean, you have to take into consideration things like I Spit on Your Grave or Last House on the Left. I think there are antecedents to this film as far back as things like the surrealist film Un Chien Andalou by Salvador Dali and Luis Buñuel.
Right.
So I think in that regard, it's not exactly blazing new trails. Because but I mean, I think you could also find parallels to American films like Deliverance in the same way, you know? I think something like Deliverance actually informs a whole lot of the kinds of things that we experience in the new French extremity, personally.
Yeah, I think in mentioning some of these other films, I was sort of referring to the idea of people who, I mean, well-to-do people,
Well,
people who are
do they?
people who are in control. Like, you know, it's like you look at Salo. I mean, this is clearly a comment on society, on Italian society during the war, on totalitarianism.
Fascism, absolutely.
Exactly. You look at Society, which is, you know, the Brian Yuzna film, which is very
Though,
much
of
about.
course, before we go on to Society, I mean, you have to, of course, consider though that Salo is based on the writings of the Marquis de Sade.
Yes, but also it was Pasolini's
indictment of fascism in Italy. Yes,
it's about power and people using power to absolutely destroy the will of other human beings. The same thing with Rosemary's Baby. That is another film about a secret society. Now, obviously, this is a demonic secret society, quite different. But when you look at the people, Ruth Gordon, you know, and her friends in the Dakota, and then you look at the folks kind of gathering, getting out of their cars at the end of this film to see this,
right,
or to receive this message, you know, from the martyr that they've created, Anna. I mean, to me, I saw direct parallels. What did you make of that secret society? Did you think there was something, was it unique to you, or was it something that felt like it had some direct kind of antecedents in horror?
Well, in films like The Ninth Gate with Johnny Depp and Frank Langella, you know, there are secret societies. Secret societies populate many horror films. But when you are looking at the sort of like constituents of this group, right, it's a lot of fairly wealthy older people, right? They're all arriving to this house, you know, which appears to be sort of in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
You know, they're all arriving in their chauffeured Mercedes, or you know, there's a like gorgeous Citroen that pulls into the drive at the end, you know. But so it's obviously speaking to sort of bourgeois values, in French culture, you know, what they're sort of willing to ignore in the pursuit of something that they want.
I think that's to me, that's like what stays with you in this film. It's the idea that these people are willing to put these poor women through this horrific torture to achieve this, what they believe to be the ultimate kind of, you know, religious transcendence, is horrifying, because we don't really get to know these people at all. All we see is what Anna is put through in this film. We see what she has to go through to get to this point.
We see what several of the sort of captured women have been put through as we go through the film. But I'm not sure that I would agree with your description of the sort of torturers as sort of you know, gleefully you know, enacting these tortures, right? I mean, I can't quite tell myself, and I will be totally honest that in the preparation for this conversation, I saw Martyrs for the second time. You know, this is not a film like many, many others that I return to again and again and again. And quite frankly, I'm not even all that like grossed out or offended by the visuals of the film. It's just not one that I return to again and again. I recognize its value, but it isn't, you know, it's not among my my go-to.
There are people who are enacting the torture, and they
Right.
do it with a kind of grim, inevitability. Like the people
Determination.
the man who is responsible for essentially beating Anna into submission, and then the woman.
A pulp, quite frankly.
Oh yeah, and then the woman who basically makes her little gruel in the blender, and then force feeds it to her. There's not a lot of glee, clearly, in their actions, whereas the glee is in the anticipation and the excitement and the sort of buzz that sort of ripples through this crowd as they gather to receive what they believe to be Anna's message, and
which they've been pursuing for 15 years.
Exactly. And the thing is, so I think to me the whole idea of the secret society that is sort of planning this sort of perfect martyrdom is kind of like the big idea really behind this film, and the thing that makes it sort of transcend a lot of other sort of torture porn films of its ilk. It makes it about something much, much bigger than shooting people or beating people or force feeding people or cutting people. It's not just a gore fest.
And when it is gorier, and something that we haven't really talked about, but obviously should talk about, is the fact that this is sort of like 2 movies for the price of one. I mean, you're sort of watching it up until about, I don't know, 40 minutes in, and it feels like a fairly straightforward kind of home invasion revenge kind of film that we've seen before. I mentioned several earlier. Last House on the Left, I Spit on Your Grave.
Yeah, even Irreversible to some extent. I mean, that is essentially a rape revenge film.
But when this film pivots, it is in a direction that you would not ever be able to anticipate based on the first half of the film. And what I meant to say about sort of gore or violence or, the portrayal of these ideas in the film, in the first half, the gore is very haphazard. The injuries are very imprecise, right? It's lashing out with a straight razor.
It's Lucie walking in with a shotgun and blowing people away.
Right. It's chaotic.
C'est qui cet emmerdeur?
Parle mieux, Marie Belfond.
C'est dimanche quand même.
Et alors? Tu reposes quoi le dimanche? Hein? Ta semaine à l'usine?
But in the second half of the film, the violence seems to be aiming at a certain level of, artistry almost. It becomes clinical, it becomes medical. It's still very violent, it's still very brutal, but the sort of compositions that the cinematographer is creating are like pieces of art, right? I mean, it's sort of like these transcendental Clive Barker Hellraiser meets, I don't know, Thoreau, right? I mean, it's incredibly gory, but it's transformative, it's transcendental.
Right. I mean, when you think about it, what is leading them, what is guiding them? They are referring to images, photography, people before they died having suffered tremendous pain. And they are literally trying to recreate those moments in real life.
Where through pain.
Right, but they're putting someone through something. In other words, the people in the pictures may have suffered some accident or something terrible happened to them, and you're seeing them in the moments before they died. They're literally trying to recreate those moments, but through, creating the suffering themselves. In other words, they're making a martyr. They're creating
Right.
a martyr through pain, through
Applied
exactly.
physical pain.
That's
Yeah.
right. That's right. I want to ask you a sort of larger question about one of this film's best set pieces is the secret passageway that Anna discovers to this sort of secret world under the home,
Yes.
which is these hallways with these backlit images of the real world martyrs that we just talked about. There's a jail cell and there's a medical lab. And it makes me think that there should be a special subgenre called sub-basement horror or subterranean horror, which I think you could easily apply to this film, as well as films like The Human Centipede, Get Out, and even Parasite to some extent. What is it about sub-basements you think that holds such terror for people?
Well, because I think as you read about real life monsters, right? When you read about serial killers, there's always some, locked, false wall in a basement. There's always some, by going through a tiny door in the basement and crawling along for 20 feet in pitch black, you emerge at like a suspended room underground that no one can hear anything from. It's like these things really happen, and obviously what we're seeing in this film is kind of, or in the second half of the film when Anna discovers this subterranean layer. I mean, look, since the Phantom of the Opera in 1925, there have been subterranean layers in horror films, right?
Sure.
But what Anna discovers beneath this sort of like gorgeous home in the country is meant to show the evolution of whatever this group of people is from the very beginning of the film, right, when they're at like an abandoned meat plant,
right,
to now when they've got, they're like in the the nerve center in Dr. Strangelove under there,
Yeah, I think also, there's something about claustrophobia and in space, no one can hear you scream. The idea of being utterly cut off from the world just kind of makes, Anna's situation that much more hopeless. It's like nobody knows she's down there. And every time that ladder comes crashing down, you just know that something awful is going to happen to her, and that series of blackout scenes that is just so hard to watch.
I was a little bit, I felt it was kind of overdone.
Interesting.
I thought it was, it was a simple and effective thing to do. It kind of probably spoke to her lapses in and out of consciousness, generally speaking, or memory or recall or something. But there were such inventive transitions that occurred earlier in the film. I mean, in the prologue, when there's sort of the archival sort of 16 millimeter footage that we're seeing, and there's a great moment of transition when we go from watching the film into the real world in the past after she's been rescued. There were just many other more inventive tools used by the filmmakers.
There were moments where it felt like this film exercised a certain amount of restraint in what it showed and what it could, when you think about what it could have shown and what it chose to show, it's almost like, I know there was a American version of this film that was made. I don't know if you've seen it.
I have not seen it.
I looked at
not highly regarded.
No, and I saw the trailer for it. I was watching it and I'm like, it looks like they go a lot farther in terms of showing what they do to her in the end. And, I don't think that's for the best. I really think it's best to leave certain things to the imagination. And I think this film does. And I think that it's really to Laugier's credit that he didn't show everything that he could have shown.
And also, it does sort of engender those ideas of complicity, or voyeurism, or what that voyeuristic relationship between the audience and the spectacle is.
I mean, you see what the result of it is.
You do see what the result of it, but as we go on, there is this sort of kind of clinical remove, right? I mean, when the violence at the beginning is really hot, you know what I mean? It's messy,
right.
It's bloody, but there's a certain chill over the sort of events of the second half of the film, right? I mean, there are techniques employed here, like you said, where the violence will happen off camera and you'll only see the result of it, in this sort of glorious mise-en-scène that's been created around it. I mean, like that sort of anti-gravity kind of Catherine wheel that she is put on to be skinned, but at the end of the day, when she is skinned, when that reveal happens, it isn't like looking at something out of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre.
No.
It's like looking at something out of the Mutter Museum. I mean, because the violence is kind of transfigured in this very artful way. I mean, I don't know what it says about me, but in my apartment, while I was watching this film of Anna being skinned alive and revealed to be sort of like a skinless, perfect anatomical thing, there's a circa 1964 anatomical mannequin in my house, right? That all comes apart, that you can see the sort of sinew and the muscle,
Yeah.
So I mean, it does kind of transform her into this like art object.
Yeah, I mean, that's why I referred to it earlier as sort of high art. I mean, it's not just torture. I mean, they're creating a religious sort of, a Joan of Arc for the day.
A Joan of Arc by way of like Tarsim, like the imagery is not too far afield of some of the things that we might see in The Cell.
This is a bigger question that's more sort of about the audience for this film. Who really wants to see a film like this? I mean, I'm really curious as to your response to this. Who enjoys watching young women get tortured, flayed alive, force-fed gruel, punched repeatedly in the face and stomach? What kind of person is attracted to this, aside from blatant misogynists? Now, of course, its reputation precedes it. So now everyone's heard of how awful and hard it is to sit through this film. So everybody wants to see it for that reason. It's sort of like, as we said, morbid curiosity. But
it's also being regarded as a piece of art.
Yes, but a film simply being daring and audacious can't be enough to sell tickets. So my question for you is, what do you think the attraction is to this film and has been over the years? I mean, it's a tough watch. Why do people want to see Martyrs?
Well, I don't ever care about what other people want. I don't know. I mean, I think for some people it's an endurance test.
Yeah.
Can I handle it? Is it too much for even me, the seasoned, horror movie connoisseur?
Yeah.
I saw it again. I mean, the ideas, some of these sort of French new extreme films are deeply unappealing to me, but if someone will recommend something that I need to see because of, it's doing this thing that has never been done before, it's, captured so beautifully in this way, I'm going to see it if it comes recommended, and it came recommended, and I'm glad I saw it. But like I said to you before, it will never be on, my top 10 list.
A film
what draws people to it? I don't know what, I mean, really, with something like this, when it's set up from its Cannes premiere as having people running for the aisles, I think much like something like The Exorcist, which had a similar reputation, I think that that could probably be said of many people in the audience. I bet if we went to YouTube right now and pulled up some, early documentary about The Exorcist, we'd see outside the theater testimonials being shot for, their marketing
right.
Of people saying, I came to see it to see if I could handle it. I came to see it to see if it would scare me. And I think that is a common way of thinking that a lot of people who like horror movies and who have seen a lot of them, kind of become inured to the tricks that filmmakers employ and want that experience of really being scared, of having to look away from the screen, because that counts for high marks among people who really love these movies.
Sure, but I think you find yourself in the process of watching the film sort of questioning, what am I doing here? Like, why am I watching this? Am I a voyeur? Is there something
Of
wrong?
course.
Is there something wrong with me? I mean, I'm sitting watching horrible violence towards a young woman who is defenseless. And, I mean, I'm almost like a willing participant in it by dint of the fact that I'm paid money to watch this film.
Complicit. It's complicity.
It feels icky, I mean, it's
yes.
Is it well, but
right.
is it?
You're having.
Is it though? Because the thing is that I've heard about this film. I didn't know exactly what this film was about. I'd heard, like we talked about, that its reputation was something, and I was curious about it, and I did ask you. I said, "Can we see this film? Can we add it to the syllabus?" And you were like, "Sure, absolutely." And I'm glad you did. But at the same time, it's sort of, as I'm watching this film, I sort of am asking myself, am I enjoying this? And if so, why?
Well, but I mean, you can enjoy it on multiple levels, right? I mean, you can enjoy it because it's intellectually provocative, right? Even though, it's making your stomach turn. You can appreciate the color palette of a scene,
right?
Even though you disagree entirely with what the content is, that like you would never find yourself in relationship to that subject matter in the same way, right? It's so brutal, it's so offensive, but it's executed in such an innovative way that you can appreciate the art of the film while not feeling simpatico with the torturers, I mean, what was your sort of emotional takeaway? What was the ride you went on emotionally as you were watching this film?
I think I had to disconnect from it while I was watching it. I mean, and again, as I said earlier, it's a film that sort of grows in power the more you think about it. It is hard to watch the martyrdom of Anna at the end of this film. It's hard to watch the scene where the victim that she finds in the basement is brought upstairs, and Anna tries to we'll talk about this a little bit more in the awards, because my most disturbing scene involves that other victim. But I had to not engage with it, I guess, is kind of the way I would put it. Sort of like, it's one of those films where you watch and you say, this isn't really happening, this could never really happen. To admit in a way that this film brings you enjoyment is to say that you enjoy the watching people be tortured. Maybe part of the enjoyment is sort of seeing how far a film is going to go. Does that make sense?
It does, but also, I mean, in that same sort of question, what do you make of the title of the film?
Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense until the end. I mean, when you understand what they're doing and why they're doing it, and when Mademoiselle explains to Anna exactly what this society or this cult or whatever you want to call it does, then it begins to make sense.
The reason I ask is that as the credits are starting at the end of the film, the definition of martyr is brought up on screen. And it's very specifically focused on the interpretation of the word as witness. And so while that certainly speaks to the concept of martyrdom as it's explained to us in the film by Mademoiselle, certainly with Anna, right? I mean, they're all looking into something. They're looking beyond something, right? They're witnessing a peek behind the veil. But I can't help but feel like that isn't sort of a dig at us as sort of willing witnesses to the film that has just transpired, to the story that we have just witnessed.
I can see that. I can totally see that. I do, there is a certain sense that we have become voyeurs in the process of watching this film. I don't know if that makes us martyrs, but I do agree that we are witnesses to something awful and horrendous that no one should ever have to watch.
When that came up, though, it felt like Laugier was pointing a finger.
Perhaps.
I remember that sort of very distinctly during my first watch, and I will tell you that I didn't recall that it was so sort of blatantly spelled out for us in the credits,
Right.
But I sort of felt very similarly today watching it again, that, oh, look, you're back again, And also, what does that say, right? Repeat viewers of something like this. What is that? That is the question I want to answer, It's not necessarily the person who watches it once. What does it say about the person who comes back to see it again and again?
Yeah, I mean, what does it say about those people? I mean, it's like, are films made to be watched more than once? I mean, you would think so.
Elles étaient toutes vivantes quand la photo a été prise. Et allez me dire après ça que le concept du martyr est une invention des religieux. On a tout essayé, même les enfants. Il se trouve que les femmes sont plus sensibles à la transfiguration. Les femmes jeunes. C'est comme ça, mademoiselle.
We've talked about the group of people, the cult, the secret society, if you will, that come to hear Anna's message to Mademoiselle, as if this is going to somehow unlock the key to something, that she has become a martyr and has sort of understood the mystery of life, universe, and everything, by going through pain. And, they make a big deal of the fact that she's still alive at the end. Is she still alive? Yes, she's still alive. Okay, great. Mademoiselle goes to visit Anna, who is lying in this bath of something, and she's been flayed alive, and she leans down and she asks Anna a question, and Anna whispers something to her. We don't hear what Anna says, but we then see an announcement being made as a man is talking about the fact that, we've received the word from this martyr, and he goes upstairs to find Mademoiselle and to say, it's time to deliver the message. And she's in the bathroom. She's locked in the bathroom, I guess. And she shakes her hair out. She takes off her false eyelashes. She then sticks a gun in her mouth and commits suicide, and that's the end of the film. And the thing that went through my mind is that she learned something that she didn't really want to know, or that she didn't feel was worth passing on, or that it was completely the opposite of what she had thought all along, or that she was just dead wrong in everything she thought. What do you make of that ending scene?
I think that it is clearly not meant to be a clear, decisive answer for the audience. Right?
Sure. It could be one of 15 things.
Right. I mean, the thing that you didn't mention is that, in fact, it is everything that she's hoping for.
True. That's true. That's
puts herself there that much more quickly.
So in a way, it's like the secret dies with her.
Well, certainly, but is her is her suicide meant to tell those other people not to come along immediately? I mean, is it a warning? Is it it's so impossible to I mean, for me at least, I have no concrete takeaway other than whatever the answer is, everything leading up to it has been meaningless, right? It's the most nihilistic sort of ending to a nihilistic film.
That was kind of the feeling I had as well, is that,
right,
that whatever Anna said to her in that moment shook Mademoiselle.
Right.
And you don't know, did she learn something profound, or did she learn something utterly meaningless?
Right.
And that meaninglessness is what caused her to realize this whole thing has been for nothing.
Right.
And it's like taking her own life is the only way to kind of rationalize the meaninglessness of it all. I mean, that's bleak. That's the nihilistic ending for you right there. That's the way I read it, that whatever Anna told her, which, who knows, could have been like her singing, the national anthem, the Marseillaise. I mean, who knows what she was saying, but it clearly was not what Mademoiselle expected to hear.
I don't think it was clearly not what she expected to hear. It could have been, you're going to Disney World. Do you know what I mean?
Yes.
Like,
yeah.
hurry on up. The ferry's going to leave without you. I don't know.
Yeah, exactly.
But I mean, if the context that surrounds that pronouncement in this film is, if we learn anything from what has come before, it's probably that all of these experiences are virtually meaningless. Do you know?
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, that is sort of the esoteric statement that is kind of the cherry on the cake of this film. And then immediately thereafter, Laugier is poking his finger in our noses, and you've just been a witness to this, right? What does that say about you? And what is a witness, right? A witness is I think, especially when you're looking at this kind of story, a very kind of pejorative, negative thing to call somebody who's just seen this, right? Because a witness is generally speaking not someone who gets involved and tries to change the course of an action. It's somebody who's a bystander who happens to be watching something transpire.
You know what it made me think of? It made me think of, for some strange reason, the end of 2001 when Dave Bowman is going through the Stargate, and essentially, he is seeing something that nobody else has seen before. He has become privy to something that is so otherworldly and spectacular that he essentially has been given the ultimate knowledge, whatever that is. And then we cut to the hotel room. He gets older. He becomes an old man. He dies. The monolith appears. The film ends on this great note of ambiguity. It's almost as if somebody had gone to Dave on his bed and whispered, what did you learn from this experience? And he just looked at them and went, in some sense, maybe Kubrick was saying that, like maybe that's the big cosmic joke of that film, is that the end actually means nothing. It's just a lot of bright lights.
And the winner is, well, the time has come.
And now it's time for the awards segment of our show, in which we give out prizes for the scenes and characters that we think make this such a memorable film. Where do you start? But with the most disturbing scene, the Tom Six Award, which we may have to rename the Pascal Laugier Award, for a film in which just almost everything in it is disturbing. And the martyrdom of Anna is almost impossible to watch. But as I said, surprisingly, it's not that bloody. And the worst atrocities aren't actually shown on screen. So there's one scene in particular that I would give the Tom Six Award to. And as we said, at one point, Anna ventures downstairs. The ladder goes down. She climbs down. She finds the jail cell, and she finds this emaciated woman whose skin has just been scratched up.
I mean, she's like devastated.
And she's wearing some kind of mask apparatus over her face, where she can't see. And Anna manages to get her back up into the house. And at one point, she seemingly very altruistically places her in a bathtub and starts to kind of, sponge her down to sort of clean her up a little bit. And it's hard to say. I think you know where I'm going with this. But for some reason, Anna decides to remove this head apparatus with a screwdriver because it's been somehow like stapled to this woman's head,
attached.
Exactly.
Face.
And she pries the I don't know what they're almost like hooks or staples out with a screwdriver, and the woman is just in absolute agony and bleeding profusely, and you see the blood just dripping down through the mask.
Not only blood.
It's the clear winner of the Tom Six Award.
Eric, I'm right there with you.
Okay, good.
We don't really linger on the details of the woman that Anna discovers down in the depths, right?
Right.
Until we've really got her in the tub.
Yeah.
I wasn't quite sure what was happening on her head, right? But the longer we spend with her, the more we see her, the details that we pick up on, it becomes very clear that in fact the center of her head has been shaved or cauterized,
yes,
so that no hair grows there, and that this device, these blinders, which sort of encircle her entire head, I didn't know if in fact we might learn that there was something going on to limit what she could hear as well. I didn't know if there was some kind of like oral component, auditory component to the thing.
God. Yeah.
But so anyway, as she's using a screwdriver to pry those things off, and she's kind of like using the mask itself as kind of the fulcrum to rip those. I don't even know what they are. They're like construction level hardware that has been like hammered into her face and skull and when Anna ultimately gets it off, there's not only blood, but there's also like a sticky, shiny kind of, it's as if there's like active infection under there. I don't know. It's really troubling to look at.
Yeah.
And to say nothing of the fact that this is all crowning a body that is just a roadmap of pain.
Right.
Where this woman has been either scarred by others or by herself. I don't know, but she is, where you can see where the shackles that she's had on her wrists have worn through the skin. That I think really when that started to come off was where I really started to think about Fincher, and that obviously Laugier had seen and probably lingered far too long on a lot of the design of Seven.
Yeah. Let's go to the most likable character, the Seth Brundle Award, named for Jeff Goldblum's character in The Fly. Who'd you like in this film, Bradford?
I like Anna, only. There are so many great sort of aspects of her performance, the way that the film sort of just conspires against her all along, I thought one of the most sort of heartbreaking things was right before Anna is captured and begins her pretty quick road to martyrdom. She has a phone call with her mother, with whom she hasn't spoken in years, who obviously had given her up for adoption or put her in foster care or under the care of whatever hospital was looking after the two of them. And it was just the totally unpleasant, loveless, joyless conversation, so I have to say the most likable character is Anna. I give her my Seth Brundle tonight.
I am also going to go with Anna. She clearly grows in this film. She changes. Well, there's a level of doubt, actually. She clearly loves Lucy. It's implied strongly that they're in a relationship. But also she says to her at one point, I believe you. And I think it's when she sees this other victim that she realizes that even if there was a shred of doubt in her mind about what Lucy went through, now it is gone. And I think when Lucy is unconscious on the couch, she says, forgive me. And it's
when she's unconscious on the couch. She slit her throat and both of her wrists. I think it's pretty safe.
It's pretty close to dead.
Yeah.
But Anna does ask for her forgiveness. And I think it's because Anna, as I said, harbored some doubt that maybe this didn't really happen, that maybe Lucy was projecting. There is some level of horror at what Lucy is doing. And in a way, for Anna, it's not the murder of this family is not entirely justified. And it's because that doubt remains. And when
Right.
she finds the victim in the basement, she realizes that this is really Lucy's experience, that she really did go through this. And it's too late for her. But she changes. I mean, she grows as a character at that point. It's at that point that the victim is blown away by the black shirts as they come in. And as you say, Anna begins her road to martyrdom. Let's go to our next award. That's the character that most deserved to live. The Ellen Ripley Award, named for
Sigourney Weaver.
Sigourney Weaver.
Who is in Martyrs? Who's the Sigourney Weaver that most deserved?
Who's the crazy Mary that most deserved to live?
Deep cut,
real deep cut, folks. I guess it's Lucy for me, because she does die and she doesn't deserve anything that happens to her as a child, and she has what appears to be a fairly heartfelt relationship with Anna. She's lived her life with a lot of pain, horrible memories, and she sort of managed to, you think, at the end of the newsreel footage or the 16 millimeter footage, that she seems to be like a happy little girl, and then she shows up at the house. And so I guess you could sort of think of her as a villain at that point, but in a way she is successful at getting revenge on the people who did horrible things to her, and she doesn't make it. Of course, this film wouldn't be what it was if she did get away with it, but at the same time, it's kind of a shame to lose her when we do. And
well, that's very sweet of you to go share in the wealth, but I have to give it to Anna. I mean, I have to say, Lucy is immeasurably damaged. I don't think that there is any universe in which Lucy has any kind of a real life. She is so destroyed by the events of the past and by the events that she continues to carry, the sort of artifacts of that experience that she carries with her into.
Sure, but does that mean she deserves to die?
It doesn't mean she deserves to die, but she's not the character who most deserves to live. When you think about it, at the end, while Anna's conclusion is not expressly illuminated for us.
We don't know if she expires, do we?
We don't know if she expires, but she's skinless and she's laying in an aspic in the basement,
aspic, yes.
Right. She's not pulling through,
No.
Optimist though you may be. Anna's not gonna make it to the sequel,
which brings us to the John Doe Award, the character that most deserved to die and does, which complicates it because you want Anna to die because of all the things she goes through. Death would be a blessing. No one should have to suffer what she did. But I am going to share the wealth again, sir. I'm going to give it to the unnamed victim in the basement as the character that most deserved to die, because whatever Anna got, the scene where that woman is in the tub and has that thing removed from her head, it's like, boy, you just don't want her to have to live with that.
Don't be a Kevorkian here. We're not talking about mercy killings.
Excuse me.
We're not talking about euthanasia.
First of all, just to satisfy the requirements of this award, she does die, sir. They put her to death. They don't let her live a second longer than she has to.
But did she deserve to die?
Oh.
As if it's a reward?
Sir, would you want to live with that head?
I guess it's a question about quality of life. The character who most deserved to die, and does, is probably Daddy when he opens the door.
Oh my God.
Either that or that sister. Because, what's more annoying than your little sibling taking your love notes out of your hand, running around the house? I mean, she got a blast right in the South Side, but no, I really have to say, I mean, I have to imagine that if seeing the man's face when he opened the door was so triggering, and I hate that word, but so triggering to that double-barreled shotgun, he must have been pretty brutal to young Lucy. And I think that number one
Daddy
was the most deserved to die. Yeah.
Okay. Well, there it is. And now I'm really going to tickle your fancy, sir, because
please do.
This is going to make you so, I'm going to make you about to make you so happy. The Gaspar Noé Ken Russell Award, most gratuitous screen moment. Wow, where do you start? Sir, I am going to pass on this award.
Me too.
This film states its intentions from the very beginning.
Absolutely.
And it never ever strays from that. It's hard to say there's one gratuitous moment in this film.
Look at this.
What are we, 3 for 5 on this?
We might be.
Is this a first?
This is a record.
It is. It is. Normally
I'm
we're
thrilled.
just...
And I knew you were going to say that, but I'm so glad you said it.
All right. Well, you know, sometimes I say things...
How can you say that there's something gratuitous in a film where it's...
You can't.
I mean, no.
Folks, we hope you enjoyed this podcast. Give us a rating on iTunes. Tell your friends. Maybe even subscribe. And be sure to check out additional information on our website, 21jumpscare.com.
Our theme music is by Sir Cubworth. Our research is handled by our friends IMDb and Vic Apadia. Now, how can our audience find you online, Mr. Winnick?
You can find me in the same place you can find Mr. Apadia, on the internet.
Thank you, Mr. Winnick. And thank you, folks, for joining us. We'll see you next time at the internet's latest address for horror, 21 Jump Scare.